She pressed her dead father's hunting knife against the man's throat and whispered 3 words that would send her running 500 miles across America. "I will never marry you." Marcus Webb's blood dripped onto the floorboards of her childhood home, and Ruth McCaffrey, 24 years old, with nothing but a stolen horse and a map to Texas, rode into the summer darkness, knowing one truth: if he caught her, he would not kill her. He would do something far worse. He would make her wish she was dead. Now here is how that story began. Before we go on, if you are new here, hit subscribe. I share new frontier stories every week. And drop a comment telling me where you are listening from tonight. I want to see how far this story travels. 3 weeks before Ruth McCaffrey pressed that knife to Marcus Webb's throat, her father died with a secret on his lips. Samuel McCaffrey was a blacksmith. His hands had shaped iron for 30 years in St. Louis, Missouri. Those same hands now gripped Ruth's wrist with a strength that surprised her, pulling her close to his fever-cracked lips. "Texas," he rasped. "Tom Brennan. He owes me. Go to him, Ruth. Promise me." "Papa, I do not understand." "Promise me you will go, before Marcus takes everything." Ruth promised. She always kept her promises. Samuel McCaffrey died at sunset, and before his body was cold, Marcus Webb walked through the door of the blacksmith shop like he already owned it. Because as Ruth would learn that night, he did. Marcus was 35 years old, handsome in the way a snake is handsome, all smooth scales and patient eyes that watched and waited. He was the son of Ruth's stepmother by her first marriage, which made him no blood relation to Ruth at all, a fact he reminded her of often. "The shop is mine now." Marcus set a stack of papers on the anvil still warm from the day's work. "Your father signed it over to me 6 months ago, along with everything else." Ruth's hands went cold. "That is a lie." "Is it?" Marcus smiled, not a warm smile, the kind of smile a man gives when he knows he has already won. "Your father was a good man, Ruth, but a good man with gambling debts is still a man with debts. I paid them. In exchange, he signed over the shop, the house, and one other thing." He stepped closer. Ruth stepped back. Her spine hit the workbench. "You!" "I am not property. According to this contract, you are promised to me in marriage, your father's signature, witnessed by Judge Harmon himself." Marcus tilted his head, studying her face the way a buyer studies a horse. "I have been patient, Ruth. I gave Samuel time to tell you himself. He was too much of a coward. So now I am telling you, we marry in 3 weeks. Ruth's hand found the hammer on the workbench behind her. Her fingers closed around the handle. "I would rather die." Marcus laughed. Soft, almost gentle. "No, you would not. And you will not. Because if you run, I will find you. If you fight, I will break you. And if you try to hurt me—" He glanced at her hand on the hammer. "I will make you watch while I burn this shop to the ground with your father's body still inside. Do you understand me, Ruth?" She understood. She understood that Marcus Webb was not a man who made empty threats. She understood that her father, God rest his soul, had sold her to pay his debts. And she understood that she had exactly 3 weeks to find a way out of this cage. Ruth released the hammer, lowered her eyes, let her shoulders slump in the posture of a woman defeated. "Good girl," Marcus said. He touched her chin, tilting her face up to look at him. His fingers were soft. He had never worked a day in his life. "I knew you would see reason." He left. Ruth stood motionless until she heard his horse ride away. Then she walked to her father's small desk in the corner of the shop, opened the locked drawer with the key he wore around his neck, and found 2 things. A folded map of Texas with a town called Brennan's Creek circled in faded ink, and a letter. The letter was from a man named Tom Brennan. It was dated 1855, 20 years ago. Samuel. "If you ever need anything, anything at all, you come to Texas. You saved my life in that fire. I owe you more than I can ever repay. My ranch is yours. My home is yours. Whatever you need, brother, you have it." Tom Ruth read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, tucked it into her dress, and began to plan. For 19 days, she was the perfect picture of obedience. She smiled when Marcus visited. She nodded when he talked about their future. She let him hold her hand without pulling away, even though his touch made her skin crawl. And every night after the house went dark, Ruth packed. She could not take much. A change of clothes, her mother's Bible, the map, the letter, her father's hunting knife, the one with the antler handle he had made himself, and every coin she could find hidden in the cracks and corners of the shop. $17 total, enough to survive. Maybe. On the 20th night, 2 days before the wedding, Marcus came to the house drunk. Ruth heard him stumble through the door, heard his heavy footsteps on the stairs, heard him push open her bedroom door without knocking. "Ruth," his voice was slurred, thick. "I have been thinking." She sat up in bed. The knife was under her pillow. Her fingers found it in the darkness. "Why wait?" Marcus moved toward her. "We will be married in 2 days. What difference does it make?" "Stop." He did not stop. Ruth threw off the blanket and stood, the knife now visible in her hand, the blade catching the moonlight through the window. Marcus laughed. "What are you going to do with that? You are not a killer, Ruth. You are a frightened little girl who—" She moved faster than he expected. The blade opened a shallow cut across his throat, not deep enough to kill, just deep enough to bleed, just deep enough to show him she was not bluffing. Marcus stumbled backward, his hand flying to his neck. Blood seeped between his fingers. His eyes went wide with something Ruth had never seen in them before. Fear. "I will never marry you," Ruth said. Her voice did not shake. Her hand did not tremble. "And if you follow me, the next cut will not be shallow." She ran. She grabbed the saddlebag she had hidden in the stable. She took the fastest horse, Marcus's own mare, because the irony pleased her. And she rode into the summer night, heading southwest, following the stars, the way her father had taught her when she was a girl. For 3 weeks, Ruth rode. She avoided towns when she could, slept in barns and under bridges, ate when she found food and went hungry when she did not. She sold the horse in Kansas City and bought passage on a freight wagon heading to Texas. She walked the last 40 miles on foot because the wagon broke down and the driver said he could not wait. The Texas sun was brutal. 100 degrees in the shade, and there was no shade. The red dust coated everything, her skin, her hair, her lungs. Her shoes wore through on the second day of walking. She wrapped her feet in strips torn from her petticoat and kept going, because stopping meant dying, and Ruth McCaffrey was not ready to die. She found Brennan's Creek on a Thursday afternoon in late July. It was barely a town, a general store, a saloon, a church, and a handful of houses scattered along a single dirt street. The sign at the edge of town was so sun-bleached she could barely read the letters. Ruth walked to the general store. The man behind the counter looked at her like she was a ghost. Given how she must have looked thin, sunburned, her auburn hair tangled and wild, her dress more dust than fabric, she probably resembled one. "Tom Brennan," she said. Her voice cracked from 3 days without water. "Where is his ranch?" The storekeeper's face changed. Something soft and sad passed through his eyes. "Miss Tom Brennan is dying. Doc says he has got maybe a week left, maybe less. His ranch is 4 miles north. Follow the creek until you see the big oak tree. Cannot miss it." Ruth bought a canteen of water with her last 50 cents. She drank half of it standing at the counter. Then she walked 4 more miles in the Texas heat, following a creek that was barely more than a trickle until she saw it. The oak tree. It was massive, ancient. Its branches spread wide enough to shade half an acre, and beneath those branches sat a small ranch house with a covered porch and a rocking chair that was empty. Ruth's legs gave out 50 feet from the door. She did not faint. Ruth McCaffrey did not faint. But her body pushed past every limit for 3 weeks straight, simply refused to take another step. She dropped to her knees in the dirt, then fell forward onto her hands, her vision swimming, her breath coming in ragged gasps. That was how Jesse Hawthorne found her. He was riding back from checking the fence line on the western edge of Tom's property. He had promised the old man he would look after the ranch while Tom was sick, and Jesse Hawthorne kept his promises. He saw her from 100 yards away, a figure in the dirt not moving. For a moment, he thought it was a body. Then he saw her shoulders rise with a breath, and he kicked his horse into a gallop. Jesse dismounted before the horse fully stopped. He dropped to one knee beside her, his hand going to her shoulder. Miss, can you hear me?" Ruth's head came up, her green eyes bloodshot and wild focused on his face, and in one motion faster than Jesse would have believed possible. From a woman who looked half dead, she rolled onto her back, drew a knife from somewhere in her dress, and pressed the blade to his throat. "Do not touch me." Jesse froze. He was not afraid of the knife. He had faced worse. But the look in this woman's eyes, the desperate, cornered animal fury burning there, that gave him pause. "Easy now." He raised his hand slowly, palms out. "I am not going to hurt you. I am just trying to help. I do not need help. Ma'am, you are lying in the dirt with sunstroke and a fever. You need something." Ruth's hand trembled. The knife wavered. And then slowly she lowered it. "Tom Brennan," she said. "I need to see Tom Brennan." Something shifted in Jesse's gray-blue eyes. "You know Tom?" "My father knew him. Samuel McCaffrey. From St. Louis." Jesse was quiet for a long moment. Then he sat back on his heels and took off his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. "Miss McCaffrey, my name is Jesse Hawthorne. Tom Brennan is my neighbor and my friend. And I am sorry to tell you this, but Tom died yesterday morning." Ruth stared at him. The words did not make sense. They could not make sense. She had walked 500 miles. She had cut a man's throat. She had given up everything. Everything to reach this place, to reach this man who owed her father a debt. And he was dead. "No." The word came out small, broken. "No, that is not possible. I came all this way. He was supposed to help me. He was supposed to—" "I know." Jesse's voice was quiet, steady. "I know. And I am sorry." Ruth's body betrayed her then. The tears she had not shed in 3 weeks, not when she cut Marcus, not when she sold her horse, not when she walked 40 miles on bloody feet, came flooding out in a wave that shook her entire frame. She did not want to cry. She hated crying. But her body had reached the end of its endurance, and there was nothing left to hold the grief back. Jesse Hawthorne did not touch her. He did not offer empty words or hollow comfort. He simply knelt there in the dust beside a stranger who was falling apart, and he waited. When the worst of it had passed, Ruth wiped her face with a shaking hand and looked up at him. Really looked at him for the first time. He was tall, over 6 feet, broad-shouldered. His face was tanned and weathered, with a thin scar running along his left jaw. His eyes were gray-blue, the color of rain clouds, and they watched her with an expression she could not quite read. "What do I do now?" The question was not really meant for him, but he answered anyway. "Tom left a will. His lawyer is in town. I do not know what is in it, but Tom talked about Samuel McCaffrey. Talked about him a lot, especially near the end." Jesse paused. "I think you should stay. At least until you know what Tom wanted." "I cannot stay here. There is a man following me. If he finds me—" "What man?" Ruth hesitated, but something in Jesse's steady gaze made her want to tell the truth. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that she had nothing left to lose. "His name is Marcus Webb. He is from St. Louis. He believes I belong to him, and he will not stop until he finds me, or I am dead." Jesse Hawthorne looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood, offered her his hand, and spoke words that Ruth would remember for the rest of her life. "Then we had better make sure he does not find you." He helped her to her feet. Her legs were shaking, barely able to hold her weight. Without asking permission, Jessie slid an arm around her waist to steady her, and together they walked toward the ranch house. "Tom's place is empty now," he said. "You can stay here tonight. Tomorrow we will go see the lawyer. After that, we figure out what comes next." "Why are you helping me?" Ruth asked. "You do not know me." Jessie was quiet for a few steps. Then, "Tom Brennan saved my father's life once. Long time ago. My father always said if any of Tom's people ever needed help, we would give it. You are Tom's people now, Miss McCaffrey. That makes you my responsibility." Ruth wanted to argue. She had spent the last 3 weeks refusing to depend on anyone. But her body was failing, and this man with the rain-cloud eyes was the only thing standing between her and the dirt. They reached the porch. Jessie helped her up the steps and through the door into the cool darkness of the house. He settled her into a chair, brought her water, and built a fire, even though the evening was warm. "Stay here," he said. "I need to ride back to my place and tell my brother where I am. I will be back before dark." "Your brother?" "Nathan. He is a good man. You will like him." Jessie paused at the door. "Miss McCaffrey, I meant what I said. Whatever trouble is following you, you are not facing it alone anymore." He left before she could respond. Ruth sat in the darkened house that belonged to a dead man she had never met, drinking water from a tin cup, and tried to understand what had just happened. She had come to Texas looking for salvation. She had found a grave instead. But she had also found something else. Something in the way Jessie Hawthorne had looked at her when she told him about Marcus. Not pity, not fear. Something harder. Something that looked almost like anger. Ruth did not know what tomorrow would bring. She did not know what was in Tom Brennan's will. She did not know if Marcus was already on his way to Texas riding hard with paid men at his back. But for the first time in 3 weeks, she was not alone. And that she decided was enough for tonight. Outside, the Texas sun sank toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The heat of the day began to fade, and somewhere to the north, a man named Jessie Hawthorne rode toward home with a stranger's story heavy on his mind. He did not know yet that Ruth McCaffrey would change everything, but he would learn. They both would. Jessie Hawthorne returned before dark, just as he had promised, but he did not come alone. The man riding beside him was younger, maybe 28, with the same gray eyes, but an easier smile. He swung down from his horse and crossed the porch in 3 long strides, his hand already extended. "Nathan Hawthorne, Jessie's brother, and you must be the woman who put a knife to his throat." Ruth stiffened. "He told you that?" "He tells me everything." Nathan grinned. "Do not worry. He said you had good reason. Anyone who survives 3 weeks running from whatever you are running from gets my respect before they get my judgment." Jessie appeared in the doorway behind his brother. "She needs food. When did you last eat, Miss McCaffrey?" Ruth tried to remember. 2 days ago, maybe 3. Nathan whistled low. "Jessie, get the fire going. I will handle the rest." For the next hour, Ruth sat at Tom Brennan's kitchen table while 2 strangers cooked for her, argued with each other about the proper way to make biscuits, and treated her like she was family instead of a half-dead woman who had stumbled onto their land with a knife, and a story about a man who wanted to own her. It was strange. It was uncomfortable. And it was the kindest thing anyone had done for her since her father died. "Eat slow," Jessie said, setting a plate in front of her. "Your stomach will not handle much after going empty that long." Ruth ate. The food was simple beans, salt pork biscuits that were slightly burned on the bottom, but it tasted better than anything she could remember. She ate until her stomach ached, then pushed the plate away and looked at the 2 men sitting across from her. "Why are you doing this?" Nathan glanced at Jessie. Jessie kept his eyes on Ruth. "I told you, Tom Brennan was—" "I know what you told me. I am asking why you really are doing this. You do not know me. You have no obligation to me. And I have brought trouble to your doorstep. So why?" Jessie was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower, rougher. "Because I know what it looks like when someone is running for their life. and I know what happens when nobody helps." Something in his tone told Ruth there was more to that statement, something personal. But she did not push. She had her own secrets. She could respect his. "The lawyer," she said instead. "When can I see him?" "Tomorrow morning. His name is Josiah Carter. He handled all of Tom's affairs." Jessie paused. "Miss McCaffrey, I should tell you something. Tom talked about your father a lot, and he talked about you." Ruth's heart stuttered. "About me? He never met me." "No. But Samuel wrote to him, sent letters every year for the past 2 decades. Tom knew about your mother dying, knew about your father remarrying, knew about—" Jessie stopped. "About what?" "About Marcus Webb." The name hit Ruth like a physical blow. She gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles went white. "My father wrote to Tom about Marcus. Tom showed me the letter 3 months ago. Samuel was worried. He said Marcus was circling you like a wolf circles a wounded deer. He asked Tom if there was anything he could do." Jessie's jaw tightened. "Tom wrote back, told Samuel to send you to Texas, told him there would be a place for you here no matter what." Ruth's eyes burned. Her father had tried to protect her, even while he was gambling away everything, even while he was signing contracts that sold her to a monster. He had been trying to find her a way out. He had just run out of time. "I need to see that lawyer," Ruth said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "First thing tomorrow." "I will take you myself," Jessie said. Nathan cleared his throat. "And I will stay here. Keep an eye on the place, just in case your friend from St. Louis decides to show up early." Ruth looked at him sharply. "You think he will come?" "A man like that—" Nathan shook his head. "He is already coming. Men like that do not let go. They chase until they catch or until someone stops them permanently." "Nathan!" Jessie's voice held a warning. "She needs to know what she is facing, brother. Pretending otherwise does not help anyone." Ruth stood. Her legs were steadier now, the food working its way into her bloodstream. "I know exactly what I am facing. I have known since I was 16 years old, and Marcus Webb looked at me for the first time. I watched him watch me for 8 years. I know what he is, and I know he will not stop." She looked at both brothers. "I will not ask you to fight my battles, but I need to know what options I have. If Tom left me nothing, I need to find work. If he left me something, I need to know how to protect it. Either way, I am not running anymore. I am done running." Jessie Hawthorne studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "Get some sleep, Miss McCaffrey. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." Ruth did not sleep well. Every creak of the old house made her reach for her knife. Every gust of wind against the windows sounded like footsteps. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and tried to imagine what her life would look like in a week, a month, a year. She could not picture it. The future was a blank wall. But when dawn came through the window, Ruth McCaffrey got up, washed her face, and prepared to face whatever was coming. The ride to Brennan's Creek took less than an hour. Jessie rode beside her on his black gelding, close enough to talk, but not so close as to crowd her. Ruth appreciated that. She appreciated a lot of things about Jessie Hawthorne, though she was not ready to examine that feeling too closely. "The lawyer's office is above the general store," Jessie said as they entered town. "Josiah Carter. He is honest, which is rare in a lawyer. He was Tom's friend, not just his attorney." They tied their horses outside and climbed the narrow staircase to the second floor. The office was small, a desk, 2 chairs, shelves crammed with papers and law books. Behind the desk sat a man in his 60s with white hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "Jessie." He stood extending his hand. "I expected you yesterday." "We had a complication." Jessie stepped aside, revealing Ruth. "Mr. Carter, this is Ruth McCaffrey, Samuel McCaffrey's daughter." Josiah Carter's expression shifted. Something like relief passed through his eyes. "Miss McCaffrey, thank God. Please sit down. I have been waiting for you." Ruth sat. Her heart was pounding. "You knew I was coming." Tom knew. Carter opened a drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. "He received a letter from your father 6 weeks ago. Samuel said he was sending you to Texas, that you would need protection, and that Tom should treat you as his own blood." He set the envelope on the desk. Tom rewrote his will the same day. Ruth's hands trembled as she reached for the envelope. "What does it say?" Miss McCaffrey. Tom Brennan had no living relatives. His wife died 20 years ago. His son died in the war. He had money, land, and no one to leave it to. Until your father's letter arrived. Carter paused. "Tom left everything to you. The ranch, the cattle, the bank account in town, all of it, on one condition." "What condition?" "That you stay, that you live on the land and work it for at least 1 year. If you leave before the year is up, the property reverts to the county." Ruth read the will 3 times. The words blurred together. 160 acres, 40 head of cattle, $3,000 in the Brennan's Creek Bank, a house, a barn, a life. It was more than she had ever owned, more than she had ever dreamed of owning. "There is one more thing," Carter said. He pulled out a second document. Tom anticipated that there might be people who would challenge his will, people who might claim you obtained the inheritance through fraud or coercion. So he included a letter, written in his own hand, witnessed by myself and Sheriff Miller. He handed it to Ruth. The handwriting was shaky, the hand of a dying man, but the words were clear. "To anyone who questions this, will I, Thomas Brennan, being of sound mind, leave my entire estate to Ruth McCaffrey, daughter of Samuel McCaffrey, the man who saved my life in 1855. I have never met Ruth, but I have read her father's letters for 20 years. I know her character through his words. She is strong, she is brave, and she deserves a chance to build a life free from the men who would control her. If anyone attempts to take this land from her, anyone at all, I ask that the good people of Brennan's Creek remember who I was and what I stood for. I ask them to protect her, as I would have protected her if I had lived. Tom Brennan." Ruth's tears fell onto the paper before she could stop them. "Miss McCaffrey." Carter's voice was gentle. "You are a landowner now. That gives you rights. It also gives you responsibilities. But most importantly, it gives you standing. In Texas, a woman who owns property is not so easily pushed around." Jesse spoke for the first time since entering the office. "What about claims from outside the state? If someone comes from Missouri saying she belongs to them?" "Texas does not recognize forced marriage contracts," Carter said firmly. "If Miss McCaffrey did not consent, the contract is void, and any man who tries to enforce such a contract on Texas soil will find himself facing charges of attempted kidnapping." He looked at Ruth. "You are safe here, legally at least." Ruth wiped her eyes. "And practically—" Carter and Jesse exchanged a look. "Practically," Carter said slowly, "you will need friends. You will need people who will stand with you if trouble comes. The law is on your side, but the law is slow. A bullet is fast." "She has friends," Jesse said. His voice was quiet but certain. "Nathan and I will stand with her." "You barely know me," Ruth said. "I know enough." The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Ruth held the documents against her chest, like they might disappear if she let go. Her mind was spinning with numbers, with plans, with a future that had been impossible yesterday and was suddenly terrifyingly real. "You are thinking too hard." She looked at Jesse. "How can you tell? Your face does this thing." He touched his own forehead. "Right here. A little crease. You have been doing it since we left town." Ruth almost smiled. Almost. "I am thinking about everything that needs to be done. The ranch has been sitting empty for weeks. The cattle need tending. The fences need checking. I do not even know where to begin." You begin by accepting help. I told you I am not good at that. Neither am I. Jesse pulled his horse to a stop. Ruth stopped beside him. But I have learned something in 32 years of living, Miss McCaffrey. Pride is a luxury. Survival is not. If you want to keep this land, you will need hands to work it. Nathan and I can help until you get established. After that, you can hire your own crew. And what do you want in return? The question hung between them. Jesse's gray-blue eyes met her green ones, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. I want nothing you are not willing to give, he said finally. Tom was my friend. He asked me to look after this place. Now I am looking after you too. That is all. Ruth wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. But 8 years of Marcus Webb had taught her that men always wanted something. We will see, she said. Jesse nodded. He did not push. He simply turned his horse toward the ranch and let her follow in her own time. 3 days passed, then a week, then 2. Ruth threw herself into the work with a ferocity that surprised even herself. She rose before dawn and worked until after dark. She learned to check the fence lines, to spot the signs of a sick cow, to read the weather in the way the wind shifted direction. Her hands, already calloused from years in her father's forge, grew harder still. And she discovered something about herself. She was good at this. Not just capable good. She had a mind for logistics, for planning, for seeing problems before they became disasters. The same skills that had helped her manage her father's books now helped her manage a ranch. Jesse noticed. He did not say much. Jesse rarely said much, but she caught him watching her with an expression that was not quite surprise. More like recognition. Like he was seeing something he had suspected all along. Nathan was easier to read. He said exactly what he was thinking, usually at the worst possible moment. You know, he said one evening, watching Ruth repair a section of fence by herself. Most women would have given up by now. Ruth drove another nail into the post. Most women are not running from a man who tried to own them. Fair point. Nathan handed her another nail. You know, Jesse has not smiled this much in years. Ruth's hammer missed the nail. What? I am just saying. He is different when you are around. Less like a thundercloud with legs. Nathan. Jesse's voice came from behind them. Neither had heard him approach. Do you ever stop talking? Not if I can help it. Nathan grinned and walked away whistling. Ruth kept her eyes on the fence. She could feel Jesse standing behind her, could feel the heat of his presence even in the summer air. He means well, Jesse said. He just does not know when to shut up. It is fine. Silence. Then, you are good at this, Miss McCaffrey. The ranching. You have instincts most people take years to develop. Ruth turned. Jesse was closer than she had realized. Close enough that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes, the way his dark hair curled slightly at his temples. My father taught me to work, she said. He said, idle hands make weak spirits. Smart man. Flawed man. But yes, smart. She hesitated. Mr. Hawthorne. Jesse, please. Jesse. The name felt different in her mouth, more personal. I want to show you something. Tomorrow. There is a project I am working on, and I could use a second opinion. What kind of project? You will see. The next morning, Ruth led Jesse to the small shed behind the barn. Inside, she had set up a makeshift forge using tools she had found scattered around Tom's property. Jesse stared. You built a forge. My father was a blacksmith. I learned at his knee. Ruth picked up a piece of iron she had been working on, a horseshoe perfectly shaped. I can make anything you need. Shoes, tools, hinges, whatever. It is not just ranching that will keep this place running. It is having skills that other people need. Jesse took the horseshoe from her hand, turned it over, examining the craftsmanship. When he looked up, there was something new in his eyes. Something that made Ruth's breath catch. You are remarkable, he said. It was not a compliment about her appearance. It was not flattery designed to manipulate. It was a simple statement of fact, delivered with the same quiet certainty that characterized everything Jessie Hawthorne did. Ruth did not know how to respond. So she did what she always did when emotions got too complicated. She changed the subject. I need supplies. Iron, coal, the proper tools. Can we make a trip to town? Tomorrow, Jessie said. We will go together. They never made it to town. That night, Nathan came riding up to the ranch at full gallop. His horse was lathered with sweat. His face was pale. Riders, he said, barely waiting for his horse to stop. 3 of them. Came into town this afternoon asking about a woman from Missouri. Auburn hair, green eyes, traveling alone. Ruth's blood went cold. What did you tell them? Nothing. I was not the one they asked. But Mrs. Patterson at the general store does not know how to keep her mouth shut. She told them about the woman who came in looking for Tom Brennan's ranch. Jessie was already moving. How far behind you? Maybe an hour, maybe less. They were drinking at the saloon when I left, but they will not drink all night. Ruth's mind raced. An hour. She had an hour to decide run again or stay and fight. She looked at the house she had started to think of as home. At the forge she had built with her own hands. At Jessie and Nathan, 2 men she had known for 2 weeks who were preparing to defend her like she was worth defending, and she made her choice. I am not running. Jessie turned to her. Ruth. I said, I am not running. She met his eyes. This is my land now. Tom Brennan gave it to me. I will not abandon it because Marcus Webb sent his dogs to fetch me. There are 3 of them. And there are 3 of us. Ruth drew her father's knife. I did not come 500 miles to hide. If they want me, they can come and try to take me. Jessie looked at her for a long moment. Then something shifted in his face. The careful distance he had maintained since the day they met fell away, and what remained was raw, fierce, and unmistakably personal. Nathan, he said, not taking his eyes off Ruth. Get the rifles. We are going to have visitors. Nathan returned with 3 rifles and a box of ammunition. He handed one to Jessie, one to Ruth, and kept the 3rd for himself. Ruth checked the rifle the way her father had taught her. Load sight steady. Her hands did not shake. You know how to use that? Jessie asked. My father taught me to shoot when I was 12. Said a woman alone should know how to protect herself. Ruth met his eyes. He was right. Jessie nodded once. No more questions, no more doubt. They positioned themselves around the property. Nathan took the barn roof high ground clear sight lines. Jessie stationed himself behind the water trough near the front of the house. And Ruth, despite Jessie's protests, took the porch. You should be inside, Jessie said. Behind a locked door. They are here for me. They need to see me. That is exactly why you should be hidden. No. Ruth's voice was iron. They need to see that I am not hiding. They need to see that I am not afraid. And they need to understand that if they want me, they will have to go through all of us. Jessie looked at her for a long moment. Then he touched her arm, brief, gentle, the first time he had touched her, since that first day when she put a knife to his throat. If this goes bad, it will not. If it does. His gray-blue eyes held hers. I want you to know that meeting you was not an accident. I do not believe in accidents anymore. Before Ruth could respond, Nathan's whistle cut through the night air. 3 short bursts. The signal they had agreed on. They were here. Ruth heard the horses before she saw them. 3 riders moving slow, coming up the main road toward the ranch. They stopped 50 yards from the house just beyond comfortable rifle range. The man in front was large, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it had been carved from rough stone. He wore 2 pistols on his hips and a rifle across his back. The 2 men flanking him were smaller, but no less dangerous, the kind of men who killed for money and slept soundly afterward. Ruth McCaffrey. The big man's voice carried easily in the still night air. My name is Silas Crenshaw. I have been sent by Marcus Webb to escort you back to Missouri." Ruth stepped to the edge of the porch. The rifle hung loose in her hands, pointed at the ground but ready. "I am not going to Missouri." "That is not really your choice, miss." "It is exactly my choice. This is my land, my home, and you are trespassing." Crenshaw laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Your land. According to who, some dead man's will." He spat in the dirt. "Mr. Webb has lawyers, real lawyers, from real cities. They will tear that will apart like tissue paper. You have nothing, Miss McCaffrey. Nothing but a fantasy." "I have a rifle," Ruth said, "and 2 friends with rifles. That seems like something to me." "Friends." Crenshaw looked around, squinting into the darkness. "You mean the cowboy behind the water trough and the one on the barn roof?" "We saw them when we rode up. 3 against 3. Those are not odds I am worried about." "Then you are a fool." Crenshaw's smile faded. "Listen carefully, miss. Mr. Webb gave me very specific instructions. I am to bring you back alive and unharmed. He was very clear about the unharmed part. But he did not say anything about your friends. If you come with us now, no one has to die. If you do not—" He shrugged. "Well, Mr. Webb will understand. He knows how stubborn you can be." Ruth's finger found the trigger of her rifle. "Tell Marcus Webb something for me." "Tell him yourself. He is already on his way. Should be here in a day or 2. The words hit Ruth like a physical blow. Marcus was coming. Not sending others to do his work, coming himself. That meant he was done playing games. That meant this was the end game. "Then I will tell him when he arrives," Ruth said. Her voice did not waver. "And I will tell him the same thing I told him in St. Louis. I will never belong to him. Not today. Not ever." Crenshaw sighed. "I was hoping you would be reasonable." He raised his hand, a signal. "Take the one on the roof first." The night exploded. Nathan's rifle cracked from the barn. One of Crenshaw's men jerked backward in his saddle, clutching his shoulder. A miss. Nathan had been aiming for his chest, but it was enough to throw the others into chaos. Jesse rose from behind the water trough and fired. His shot took the second rider's horse out from under him, sending the man crashing to the ground in a tangle of limbs and dust. Crenshaw kicked his horse into a gallop, drawing both pistols as he charged toward the house, toward Ruth. Ruth raised her rifle, sighted, breathed, and fired. The bullet caught Crenshaw in the leg. He roared in pain, but kept coming, his horse closing the distance faster than Ruth could reload. 20 yards. 15. 10. Ruth dropped the rifle and drew her father's knife. Crenshaw's horse reached the porch. He was bringing his pistol up his face, twisted with rage, when Jesse's second shot took him in the shoulder and spun him sideways in the saddle. Crenshaw fell. His horse bolted, and suddenly the yard was silent, except for the groans of wounded men and the echo of gunfire fading into the night. Nathan climbed down from the barn roof, his rifle still smoking. Jesse emerged from behind the water trough and crossed to where Crenshaw lay in the dirt, clutching his shoulder and his leg. "You are making a mistake," Crenshaw gasped. "A big mistake. Do you know who Marcus Webb is? Do you know what he can do?" Jesse crouched beside him. His voice was calm, deadly calm. "I know exactly who Marcus Webb is. He is a man who sends other men to do his fighting for him. He is a man who thinks he can buy anything, including people. And he is a man who is about to learn that Texas does not work like Missouri. He will burn this ranch to the ground. He can try." Jessie stood and walked back to the porch, where Ruth stood with her knife still in her hand and her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Are you hurt?" Ruth shook her head. "No, I am—" She stopped, looked down at her hands. They were shaking now, the adrenaline surge giving way to something else. "I am fine." "Ruth." Jesse took her hands in his. His hands were rough, calloused, warm. "You did good. You stood your ground. Tom Brennan would have been proud." I shot a man. You defended yourself. There is no shame in that. Ruth looked up at him. In the moonlight, his face was all sharp angles and shadows, but his eyes were soft, concerned, real. What happens now? Now we tie these three up and take them to Sheriff Miller in the morning. After that, Jesse paused. Marcus Webb is coming. You heard what Crenshaw said, a day or two. I know. We need to be ready. I know that too. Nathan approached, shoving the two uninjured gunmen ahead of him with their hands tied behind their backs. All secure. Though I have to say these boys are not exactly criminal masterminds. The one I shot in the shoulder cried like a baby when I tied him up. They are hired help, Jesse said. Professionals, but not the real problem. The real problem is coming. They secured the three men in Tom Brennan's barn, bound tight with rope and guarded by Nathan, who volunteered for the first watch. Jesse and Ruth sat on the porch watching the horizon lighten with the first hints of dawn. Neither of them had slept. You should rest, Jesse said. So should you. I will rest when this is over. Ruth pulled her knees up to her chest. Can I ask you something? Anything. Earlier before they came, you said meeting me was not an accident. What did you mean? Jesse was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer, more vulnerable than Ruth had ever heard it. My parents were killed when I was 19. A gang of raiders hit our ranch, took everything, killed everyone except Nathan and me. We were out on the range checking cattle. By the time we got back, he stopped, swallowed. I spent 10 years after that trying to rebuild, trying to make enough money to buy back our land. I drove cattle up the Chisholm Trail more times than I can count. I slept in the dirt. I fought in range wars. I did things I am not proud of, Ruth. Things that still keep me awake at night. Jesse, let me finish, please. He turned to face her. A year ago, I finally had enough money. I bought back my parents' land. I started rebuilding. But I was alone. Nathan was here, but Nathan has his own life, his own dreams. I was alone on that ranch every night, staring at the walls, wondering what the point of any of it was. I know that feeling. I know you do. Jesse reached out and took her hand. Ruth let him. When Tom showed me your father's letter, the one about you, I read it 3 times. I thought about a woman in Missouri facing down a man who wanted to own her. I thought about how brave she must be and how alone. And He stopped again, looked away. You what? I prayed. For the first time since my parents died, I prayed that she would make it, that she would find a way out, that somehow, someday I might get a chance to meet her. Ruth's breath caught in her throat. You prayed for me. I did not know it was you specifically. I just prayed for the woman in the letter, for her safety, for her freedom. Jesse looked back at her. And then you appeared, half dead in the dirt with a knife in your hand and fire in your eyes, and I knew. Knew what? That prayers get answered, sometimes in ways you do not expect. Ruth did not think. She did not plan. She simply leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief, barely more than a brush of mouths, but it sent lightning through every nerve in Ruth's body. When she pulled back, Jesse's eyes were wide with surprise, and something else, something that looked like wonder. I am sorry, Ruth said quickly. I should not have. Do not apologize. Jesse's voice was rough. Do not ever apologize for that. He kissed her again, longer this time, deeper. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw, and Ruth felt something inside her shift. Something that had been locked away for years, protected behind walls of fear and distrust. Those walls were crumbling. When they finally broke apart, Jesse rested his forehead against hers. Whatever happens next, he said, I want you to know something. What? I will stand with you, against Marcus Webb, Against anyone who tries to take you. I will stand with you until my last breath." "Jesse, you barely know me." "I know enough." He pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. "I know that you walked 500 miles to escape a monster. I know that you faced down 3 armed men without flinching. I know that you built a forge from scraps and made it work. And I know that when I look at you, I see the strongest person I have ever met." Ruth felt tears threatening. She blinked them back. "I am not strong. I am terrified." Being brave does not mean you are not scared. It means you do what needs to be done even when you are scared. Jesse smiled the first real smile she had seen from him. "You are brave, Ruth McCaffrey, and I would be honored to fight beside you." The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Sheriff Miller came to collect the prisoners and take statements. He was a weathered man in his 50s with a handlebar mustache and eyes that had seen too much. He listened to Ruth's story without interrupting, examined the documents from Josiah Carter, and made his position clear. "Miss McCaffrey is a legal landowner in Brennan's Creek. Anyone who tries to remove her against her will is committing a crime. I do not care who they are or where they come from." "Even if he brings lawyers?" Nathan asked. "Lawyers can argue in court. They cannot drag a woman out of her home by force. And if anyone tries—" The sheriff patted the gun on his hip. "Well, that is what I'm here for." But Ruth knew Marcus Webb. She knew he would not rely on lawyers alone. Word spread through Brennan's Creek. The story of the woman who had faced down 3 gunmen grew in the telling. By the second day, some versions had her single-handedly defeating a dozen armed outlaws. Ruth found it absurd, but Jesse pointed out that reputation was a weapon too. Marcus Webb needs to know that the town is watching, that if something happens to you, people will notice, people will care. And they did notice. They did care. Mrs. Patterson from the general store came by with a basket of food and an apology for talking to Crenshaw's men. "I did not know," she said, tears in her eyes. "I would never have said anything if I had known." Old Henderson, the rancher whose land bordered Ruth's to the south, rode up with 2 of his hands and offered to help patrol the property. "Tom Brennan was a good man," he said. "Any family of his is family of mine." Even the preacher, a thin man named Reverend Crane, stopped by to offer his support, and somewhat awkwardly to ask if Ruth might be interested in attending services on Sunday. "The community needs to see you," he explained. "Needs to know you are one of us now." Ruth agreed, not because she was particularly religious, but because she understood what Reverend Crane was really saying. Belonging mattered. Community mattered. The more people who saw her as a neighbor rather than a stranger, the harder it would be for Marcus to make her disappear. On the evening of the second day, Ruth stood on the porch watching the sun set over her land. Her land. The words still felt strange in her mouth, but they were starting to feel less strange in her heart. Jesse came to stand beside her. They had not kissed again since that night on the porch, but something between them had changed. A current that ran beneath every conversation, every accidental touch, every long look across a crowded room. "He will be here soon," Ruth said. "I know." "Are you ready?" Jesse turned to look at her. "The question is whether you are ready." Ruth thought about it. About everything she had survived to get here. The years of Marcus's control. The terror of that night in her bedroom. The endless miles of road and heat and dust. The fever and the dehydration and the moments when she had been certain she would die alone in the Texas dirt. She had survived all of it. She had survived because she refused to give up. Because somewhere inside her, beneath the fear and the exhaustion, there was a flame that would not go out. "I am ready," she said. And then they heard the horses. Not 3 this time, not 5 or 10. Ruth counted at least 20 riders cresting the hill to the north, their silhouettes black against the fading orange sky. At the front of the column, on a magnificent black stallion, rode Marcus Webb. He looked exactly as Ruth remembered him. Tall, dark-haired, handsome, in that cold, predatory way that had fooled so many people back in St. Louis. He wore a black coat despite the Texas heat, and his gray eyes found Ruth immediately fixing on her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Jesse's hand went to his gun. Nathan emerged from the barn rifle ready. But they both knew the math. 20 against 3 was not a fight, it was a massacre. Marcus raised his hand. The column stopped. "Ruth!" His voice carried easily across the distance. Calm. Almost gentle. "You have led me on quite a chase." Ruth stepped to the edge of the porch. Her heart was pounding, but her voice was steady. "I am not going back with you, Marcus." "I know you believe that." Marcus dismounted gracefully and walked toward the house, stopping just outside rifle range. His men fanned out behind him, creating a wall of armed riders. "But I think you will change your mind." "I will not." "You will." Marcus smiled, that terrible, patient smile. "Because if you do not, I will kill everyone in this town, starting with your cowboy and his brother, then the shopkeeper, the preacher, the lawyer who drew up that ridiculous will. Every person who has helped you, every person who has sheltered you, every person who has so much as smiled at you since you arrived in Texas." He paused. "And I will make you watch." Jesse took a step forward. "That sounds like a threat, Webb." "It is not a threat. It is a promise." Marcus's eyes never left Ruth. "You know me, Ruth. You know I keep my promises, just like I promised you in St. Louis that you would regret running, just like I promised you that I would find you no matter where you went." He spread his hands. "Here I am." Ruth felt the world tilting beneath her feet. 20 armed men. An entire town held hostage. Jesse and Nathan outgunned 10-1. She had been so sure, so certain that she could stand and fight. But she had not counted on this. She had not counted on Marcus being willing to burn everything down just to own her. "Ruth." Jesse's voice was low, urgent. "Do not listen to him. We can—" "Can what?" Marcus interrupted. "Fight, die gloriously defending a piece of dirt in the middle of nowhere. Go ahead. I will wait. But after you are dead and your brother is dead and this ranch is ash, Ruth will still be coming back to Missouri with me. The only question is how much blood gets spilled first." Ruth looked at Jesse, at his strong jaw, his gray-blue eyes, the scar along his cheek that she had come to love without ever realizing it. She looked at Nathan, young and brave and foolish enough to die for a woman he barely knew, and she made her choice. "If I come with you," she said slowly, "willingly. You leave them alone. You leave the town alone. You ride away and never come back to Texas." "Ruth, no." Jesse grabbed her arm. "Swear it, Marcus. Swear on your mother's grave that you will leave these people in peace if I come with you." Marcus's smile widened. "I swear on my mother's grave. Come with me now and no one else has to die." Ruth turned to Jesse. His face was pale, desperate. She could see him calculating options, searching for a way out, finding nothing. "Ruth, please, do not do this. We will find another way." "There is no other way." Ruth placed her hand on his chest, over his heart. "You taught me something, Jesse Hawthorne. You taught me that some things are worth fighting for, but you also taught me that some things are worth sacrificing for. Not this, not you. I will not let him kill you." Ruth's voice broke. "I will not let him destroy this town. These people, they welcomed me. They protected me. I cannot repay that kindness with their blood." "And what about us?" The question hung in the air between them. Ruth felt her heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. "There is no us. There never was. There was just—" She stopped, took a breath. "There was just a dream, a beautiful dream. But dreams do not stop bullets." She kissed him. One last time. Brief and fierce and full of everything she could not say. Then she turned and walked toward Marcus Webb. Ruth walked toward Marcus Webb with her head held high and her heart in pieces. Each step felt like a mile. Each breath felt like drowning. Behind her, she could hear Jesse calling her name, his voice raw with desperation, but she did not turn around. If she turned around, she would break. And Ruth McCaffrey could not afford to break. Not now, not ever. Marcus watched her approach with that patient, predatory smile. I knew you would see reason eventually. You always were the smart one, Ruth. Do not speak to me. Ruth's voice was ice. We have an agreement. I come with you. You leave these people alone. That is all. Of course. Marcus held out his hand. Come, we have a long journey ahead. Ruth was 3 feet from his outstretched hand when she heard it. Hoofbeats. Not from Marcus's men, from behind them, from the direction of town. Marcus turned. Ruth turned, and what they saw made Ruth's heart stop. Sheriff Miller rode at the front. Behind him came what looked like half the town, 20, 30, 40 people on horseback and in wagons, armed with rifles and shotguns and pitchforks and whatever else they could find. Old Henderson was there with his ranch hands. Mrs. Patterson sat in a wagon beside Reverend Crane, a shotgun across her lap. Even Josiah Carter, the lawyer, rode at the back with a pistol he clearly did not know how to use. They stopped in a line facing Marcus's men. 40 against 20. The odds had just shifted. Sheriff Miller's voice rang out clear and strong. Marcus Webb, you are under arrest for conspiracy to kidnap, attempted murder, and about a dozen other charges I will figure out later. Surrender now or face the consequences. Marcus laughed. Arrest me. With what authority? This is not Missouri, Sheriff. Your jurisdiction. This is Texas. Miller's hand rested on his gun. And in Texas we do not take kindly to men who threaten our neighbors. Miss McCaffrey is a citizen of Brennan's Creek. That makes her our responsibility. And you, sir, are trespassing. Ruth watched Marcus's face change. The confident smile flickered. For the first time since she had known him, she saw uncertainty in those cold gray eyes. He had not expected this. He had expected a frightened town that would look the other way while he took what he wanted. He had not expected them to fight. You would all die for this woman. Marcus's voice dripped with contempt. A runaway, a thief, you do not even know her. We know enough. Old Henderson spat in the dirt. We know she works harder than any 2 men I have got. We know she stood on that porch and faced down your hired guns without flinching. And we know that Tom Brennan, God rest his soul, wanted her here. That is good enough for us. Tom Brennan was a fool. Tom Brennan was our friend. Mrs. Patterson's voice was sharp. And any friend of his is a friend of ours. Now you take your men and you ride back to whatever hole you crawled out of, or I swear to God I will shoot you myself. Ruth could not believe what she was seeing. These people she had known for barely 2 weeks, were risking their lives for her. They were standing up to a man with money and power and 20 armed riders, and they were doing it because they believed she was worth protecting. She had never felt less alone in her entire life. Marcus's hand moved toward his gun. You are making a mistake. All of you. The only mistake here is yours. Jesse's voice came from behind Ruth. He had moved while everyone was talking, positioning himself between Ruth and Marcus. You thought you could come to our town, threaten our people, and take what you wanted. But that is not how things work here, Webb. In Texas, we protect our own. She is not yours. Marcus's composure cracked. His voice rose. She was promised to me. Legally. Contractually. She belongs to me. I do not belong to anyone. Ruth stepped forward, past Jesse, past the invisible line between safety and danger. She walked until she was standing directly in front of Marcus Webb, close enough to see the rage burning in his eyes. I am not property, Marcus. I am not a contract or a promise or a debt. I am a person, a human being with my own will and my own choices. And I choose to stay here. I choose this town. I choose this land. She paused. And I choose Jesse Hawthorne, not because I have to, Because I want to. Marcus's hand closed around Ruth's wrist. His grip was crushing. You will regret this. Let her go. Jesse's gun was drawn before Marcus could blink. I will not ask twice. You will not shoot me. Not with 40 witnesses watching, not without starting a war. Try me. The moment stretched. Ruth could feel her pulse hammering against Marcus's fingers. She could see the calculation in his eyes, the desperate search for a way out, a way to win, a way to salvage something from this disaster. And then she saw him break. It was subtle, a shift in his shoulders, a flicker of something that might have been defeat. Marcus Webb, the man who had controlled her life for 8 years, the man who had sent hired killers and threatened to burn a town to the ground, was finally facing something he could not buy, or manipulate, or destroy. Community. People who cared about each other. The simple, stubborn courage of ordinary folks who refused to let a bully win. Marcus released Ruth's wrist. This is not over. Yes, it is. Sheriff Miller nudged his horse forward. Boys, take Mr. Webb and his men into custody. We will let the judge sort out the charges. What happened next unfolded too fast for Ruth to follow. Marcus drew his gun. Not at Jesse. Not at the sheriff. At Ruth. But Jesse was faster. The shot cracked through the air. Marcus jerked backward, his own shot going wild into the sky. He collapsed to his knees, clutching his shoulder blood seeping between his fingers. Jesse stood over him, his gun still smoking. I warned you. Marcus looked up at him with pure hatred. You think this changes anything? I have money. I have lawyers. I will be out of jail in a week and I will... No. A new voice. Older. Tired. You will not. Ruth turned. A man was pushing through the crowd. He was in his 60s, well-dressed despite the dust of travel, with gray hair and Marcus's same cold eyes. Father. Marcus's face went pale. What are you doing here? Cleaning up your mess. The older man, Webb Sr., stopped beside his son and looked down at him with undisguised contempt. Did you think I would not find out? The hired guns? The forged marriage contract? The threats against an entire town? He shook his head slowly. You have embarrassed this family for the last time, Marcus. The contract was legitimate. Father Samuel McCaffrey owed nothing. I had my own lawyers examine the documents. The gambling debts were fabricated. The contract was fraudulent. Everything you told me about this woman was a lie. Webb Sr. turned to Ruth. His voice softened slightly. Miss McCaffrey, I apologize for my son's actions. I had no knowledge of his obsession with you until recently. I came as soon as I learned the truth. Ruth did not know what to say. She had spent 8 years fearing Marcus Webb. She had never once considered that his own family might be unaware of what he truly was. How did you find out? Your father wrote to me. Before he died. He told me everything, how Marcus had manufactured debts, forged documents, threatened you into silence. Webb Sr.'s jaw tightened. I did not believe it at first. My own son. But I had people investigate. And what they found... He trailed off, shook his head again. Father, please. Marcus tried to stand. Jesse's gun stopped him. You will face justice, Marcus. Real justice, not the bought kind. Webb Sr. looked at the sheriff. I will ensure my son returns to Missouri to stand trial. On my word as a Webb, he will never bother this woman again. Sheriff Miller considered this. And if he does, then I will deal with him myself. The townspeople murmured. Ruth watched Marcus's face crumble, not just defeat now, but complete devastation. His father's rejection was worse than any bullet could have been. Take him, Webb Sr. said. I will arrange transportation back to Missouri tomorrow. Marcus's men, seeing which way the wind was blowing, surrendered without a fight. They were hired guns, not loyal soldiers. They had signed up for easy money, not a standoff against an armed town and their employer's own father. As the sheriff's men led Marcus away, he turned back one last time. His eyes found Ruth's across the crowd. "You will never be free of me," he said. "Even if I rot in prison, you will think of me every day. Every night. I will live in your head forever." Ruth walked toward him. The crowd parted. She stopped inches from his face and spoke in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "You are wrong, Marcus. I stopped thinking about you the moment I met someone worth thinking about instead. You were never special. You were just a bully with money, and now you are not even that." She turned her back on him and walked away. Marcus screamed her name, screamed threats and promises and desperate pleas, but Ruth did not turn around. She walked straight to Jesse, who caught her in his arms and held her while the man who had haunted her nightmares was dragged away into the darkness. It was over. The crowd dispersed slowly, handshakes and congratulations and promises to check on Ruth tomorrow. Mrs. Patterson pressed a basket of food into her hands. Reverend Crane offered a blessing. Old Henderson tipped his hat and rode away with his men. Finally, it was just Ruth, Jesse, and Nathan standing in front of Tom Brennan's ranch. "So," Nathan broke the silence. "That was exciting." Ruth laughed. It burst out of her before she could stop it. A wild, incredulous sound that was half joy and half relief and half something she could not name. "That is one word for it. I have others. Terrifying. Insane. The kind of thing that will give me nightmares for a decade." Nathan grinned. "But also," he looked at his brother, "the kind of thing that makes a pretty good story." Jesse had not released Ruth's hand since the crowd dispersed. Now he turned her to face him, his gray-blue eyes searching her face. "You scared me," he said quietly. "When you walked toward him. When you said there was no us. I thought, I know what you thought." Ruth reached up and touched his cheek. "I thought it too. I thought it was the only way to keep you safe." "I do not need you to keep me safe, Ruth. I need you to let me stand beside you. That is how this works. That is how we work." "I am still learning." She smiled through the tears that were suddenly flowing down her face. "I spent so long alone, so long fighting by myself. It is hard to remember that I do not have to anymore." Jesse wiped her tears with his thumb. "Then let me remind you, every day, for as long as you will let me." "Is that a proposal, Mr. Hawthorne?" "It is whatever you want it to be, Miss McCaffrey." Ruth kissed him, long and slow and full of promise. When they broke apart, Nathan was making exaggerated gagging sounds. "Get a room. Seriously, I am standing right here." "Then stop standing there." Jesse did not take his eyes off Ruth. "Go home, Nathan. We will be fine." "Are you sure? Because—" "Go home." Nathan threw up his hands. "Fine. I know when I am not wanted." He mounted his horse but paused before riding away. "Ruth, for what it is worth, I am glad you came to Texas. I have not seen my brother smile this much in years. He smiled before, rarely, and never like this." Nathan rode off into the darkness, leaving Jesse and Ruth alone beneath the stars. They sat on the porch of Tom Brennan's ranch, Ruth's ranch now, their fingers intertwined, the summer night wrapped around them like a blanket. "What happens now?" Ruth asked. "Now we build." Jesse's voice was soft but certain. "We build this ranch into something real. We build a life together. We build a future. It will not be easy. Nothing worth having ever is." He turned to face her. "Ruth, I meant what I said earlier. About meeting you not being an accident. About prayers getting answered in unexpected ways. I have spent 10 years trying to rebuild my life, but I never really understood what I was building toward until you showed up. Half-dead, knife in hand, ready to fight the world. I was not ready to fight the world. I was just too stubborn to die." "Same thing." Jesse smiled. "I want to build this with you, not for you, with you. As partners, as equals, as whatever you want us to be." Ruth thought about everything she had lost. Her father, her home in Missouri, her innocence stolen piece by piece over 8 years of Marcus Webb's control. Then she thought about everything she had gained. This land, this community, this man who looked at her like she was worth something, who treated her like a person instead of property, who had stood beside her against impossible odds and never once tried to make her decisions for her. "Partners," she said. "I like the sound of that." Jessie kissed her forehead. That gentle, reverent gesture that said more than any words could. "Welcome home, Ruth McCaffrey." Ruth leaned into him, her head against his shoulder, and watched the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The night wind carried the scent of sage and dust, and the promise of rain. She was home. Finally, truly home. And she was never running again. 3 weeks after Marcus Webb was taken away in chains, Ruth McCaffrey married Jesse Hawthorne under the old oak tree that had first given her shelter. The whole town came. Mrs. Patterson baked a cake so tall it nearly toppled twice on the wagon ride out. Reverend Crane performed the ceremony with tears in his eyes. Old Henderson gave Ruth away, claiming it was what Tom Brennan would have wanted, and Nathan stood beside his brother, grinning so wide his face looked like it might split in two. "You clean up nice," Nathan whispered to Jesse as Ruth walked toward them. "Almost handsome." "Shut up, Nathan." "Never." Ruth wore a white dress that Maggie Henderson had helped her sew from fabric bought in San Antonio. Her auburn hair was pinned up with wildflowers, bluebonnets, and Indian paintbrush that Jesse had picked that morning before anyone else was awake. Her father's hunting knife hung at her waist because Ruth McCaffrey did not go anywhere unarmed, not even to her own wedding. When she reached Jesse, he took her hands in his. His gray-blue eyes were bright with something Ruth had never seen in them before. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. "You are beautiful," he said. "You are biased." "I am honest." He squeezed her hands. "Ready. I have been ready since the day you found me in the dirt." Reverend Crane cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" The vows were simple. Ruth and Jesse had written them together the night before sitting on the porch where so many important conversations had happened. "I promise to stand beside you," Jesse said, "in drought and in plenty, in danger and in peace. I promise to treat you as my partner, my equal, my home. And I promise that no matter what comes, you will never face it alone again." Ruth's voice trembled, but it did not break. "I promise to trust you with my fears and my hopes. I promise to build this life with you not behind you or ahead of you, but beside you. And I promise that the woman who put a knife to your throat on the day we met will spend the rest of her life putting her heart in your hands instead." Nathan sniffled loudly. Jesse shot him a look. "I have allergies," Nathan muttered. "In July. Texas has strange pollen." Reverend Crane pronounced them husband and wife. Jesse kissed Ruth with a tenderness that made her knees weak, and the crowd erupted in cheers that echoed off the hills and scattered the birds from every tree within a mile. The celebration lasted until well past midnight. There was dancing and music and more food than Ruth had ever seen in one place. Jesse danced badly, just as she had expected, but he danced with her anyway, counting under his breath, and stepping on her feet, and looking at her like she was the only person in the world. "I love you," he said, during a slow song, his lips close to her ear. "I know. That is not the traditional response. I am not a traditional woman." Ruth smiled. "I love you too, Jesse Hawthorne. God help me, I do." When the last guest had gone and the lanterns had burned low, Jesse carried Ruth over the threshold of the house that was now theirs. "I can walk," she protested. "Humor me. It is tradition." "Since when do you care about tradition?" "Since marrying you made me want to do everything right." He set her down in the bedroom they would share. Their bedroom, their home, their life. Ruth looked at the man she had married and felt something she had not felt in years. Safety. Complete, unshakable safety. Not because Jesse would protect her, though she knew he would, but because she no longer needed to protect herself alone. "What are you thinking?" Jesse asked. "That I spent 8 years being afraid, and now I am not." "Not at all. Not of the things that used to scare me." Ruth touched his face. "I am afraid of new things now. Losing you, losing this, failing the people who believed in me." "You will not fail anyone, Ruth. And you will not lose me." Jesse pulled her close. "I am not going anywhere, ever." That night they became husband and wife in truth as well as name. And when morning came, Ruth woke in Jesse's arms with a certainty that had been missing from her life for as long as she could remember. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. The first year of marriage was hard. Harder than Ruth had expected. Running a ranch was not like managing a blacksmith shop. The cattle did not cooperate. The weather did not cooperate. The fences fell down faster than they could repair them. And the summer of 1876 brought a drought that dried the creek to a trickle and turned the grass brown and brittle. Ruth worked from before dawn until after dark. Her hands already calloused grew harder still. Her skin burned and peeled and burned again until it finally settled into a deep tan that would have scandalized every lady in Missouri. She loved every minute of it. "You are working yourself to death," Jesse said one evening, watching her repair a section of fence by lantern light. "I am working myself to life." Ruth drove another nail home. "There is a difference." "Is there?" "When I was in St. Louis, I spent every day waiting for Marcus to make his move, waiting for something bad to happen, waiting for my life to start or end. I was not sure which." She straightened, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Now I am not waiting for anything. I am building. Every fence post, every repaired barn board, every calf that survives because I stayed up all night with it, that is mine. I made it. No one can take it from me." Jesse was quiet for a moment. Then he took the hammer from her hand. "Let me help. I can do it myself." "I know you can." He kissed her forehead. "But you do not have to." They finished the fence together as the stars came out overhead. Nathan married in the fall of that year. Her name was Sarah Chen, the daughter of a Chinese railroad worker who had settled in Texas after the transcontinental line was completed. She was sharp-tongued, quick-witted, and utterly unimpressed by Nathan's charm. "He talks too much," Sarah told Ruth the first time they met. "I know. And he thinks he is funnier than he actually is." "I know that too." Sarah smiled. It transformed her face. "Good. Then we understand each other." The wedding was small. Sarah's father and younger brother, the Hawthorns, and a handful of friends from town. But the celebration was loud, a blend of Texas barbecue and Chinese traditions that left everyone confused and delighted in equal measure. "You know," Nathan said during the reception, watching Sarah teach Ruth how to use chopsticks, "I think those two might be more dangerous together than apart." "I think you are right," Jesse replied. "God help us all." Sarah and Ruth became sisters in every way that mattered. They worked side by side, traded skills. Ruth taught Sarah to forge horseshoes. Sarah taught Ruth to cook dishes that made Jesse's eyes water, and built a friendship that would last the rest of their lives. "I never had a sister," Ruth confessed one evening. "Neither did I." Sarah squeezed her hand. "Now we both do." In the spring of 1877, Ruth discovered she was pregnant. She told Jesse at breakfast, watching his face carefully for his reaction. For a long moment, he did not speak. His coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips, his gray-blue eyes wide with shock. Then the cup clattered to the table, and he was out of his chair, and Ruth was in his arms, lifted off her feet, and spun around the kitchen while Jesse laughed with a joy so pure it made her cry. "A baby!" His voice cracked. "We are having a baby. We are having a baby." "Ruth, He set her down gently. Too gently, like she was made of glass. "I do not know what to say. I never thought—" "You never thought what?" "I never thought I would have this." Jesse's hands trembled against her waist. A wife, a home, a family. After my parents died, I stopped believing any of it was possible. I built walls so high that even I forgot there was anything on the other side. And now you have torn them all down. He kissed her. You have torn down every wall I ever built, Ruth Hawthorne, and I have never been more grateful for anything in my life. The pregnancy was difficult. Ruth was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep food down. Jessie hovered constantly, bringing her water and crackers and whatever remedies Mrs. Patterson suggested. Nathan made jokes to lighten the mood. Sarah handled the ranch work that Ruth could no longer manage. You do not have to do everything yourself, Sarah reminded her. That is why you have family. I know. Ruth gripped the edge of the bed, fighting another wave of nausea. I am just not used to it yet. Then get used to it, because this baby is going to need you healthy, not exhausted. Samuel Jesse Hawthorne was born on a December morning, screaming his displeasure at the cold world he had entered. He had his father's gray-blue eyes and his mother's stubborn chin, and a grip strong enough to make Jesse wince when the baby grabbed his finger. He is perfect, Jesse whispered. Ruth looked at her son, and felt something unlock inside her. A door she had not known was closed, a room she had not known existed. He is ours, she said. He is ours, and no one will ever take him from us. No one, Jesse agreed. I will die first. We will both die first. They meant it, every word. The years that followed were not easy, but they were good. Ruth and Jesse expanded the ranch, buying land from neighbors who were moving on or giving up. They hired hands to help with the growing herd. They built a new barn, then a new house bigger than the old one, with room for the children who kept coming. Elizabeth was born in 1879, a girl with her mother's auburn hair and a temper to match. Thomas came in 1882, quiet and watchful, like his uncle Josiah would have been if Josiah had existed in this story. And Margaret, the youngest, arrived in 1885, surprising everyone, including her parents. I thought we were done, Ruth said, holding her newborn daughter. Apparently not, Jesse grinned. God has a sense of humor. God has too many opinions about our family size. But she would not have traded any of them. Not Samuel's stubbornness, or Elizabeth's fire, or Thomas's silence, or Margaret's endless questions. They were hers. They were theirs. They were the family Ruth had dreamed of during those long years in Missouri, the family she had thought she would never have. Nathan and Sarah had children of their own, twin boys, who terrorized the ranch and delighted their grandparents in equal measure. The two families grew together, intertwined, like the roots of the old oak tree, separate but connected, each drawing strength from the other. And through it all, Ruth and Jesse sat on that porch every evening, watching the sun set over the Texas hills, holding hands, the way they had since the very beginning. Do you ever think about the old days? Jesse asked one evening. They were both past 50 now, gray creeping into their hairlines, etched into faces that had been young when they met. Sometimes. Ruth leaned into his shoulder. I think about the girl who walked 500 miles with nothing but a knife and a prayer. I wonder what she would think if she could see all this. What do you think she would think? I think she would cry. Ruth smiled. I think she would fall to her knees and weep with gratitude, because I never imagined this was possible. I was running to survive Jesse. I was not running toward anything. I was just running away. And now I have stopped running. She looked at the house behind them, at the children's voices floating through the windows, at the land that stretched in every direction, land they had built and tended and loved. Now I am home. Jesse kissed her temple. That familiar gesture, that sacred ritual. You have been home since the day I found you. I know. I just did not believe it yet. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn orange and pink and purple. The cattle lowed in the distance. A child laughed inside the house. And somewhere in the hills, a coyote called to its mate. Jesse. Yes. Thank you. For what? For finding me. For keeping me. For never trying to change me or control me or make me into something I was not. Ruth turned to face him. You gave me something I had never had before. Freedom. Real freedom. The freedom to be exactly who I am. You gave me the same thing. Jesse's voice was rough with emotion. I was dead inside Ruth. I was going through the motions of living, but I was not alive. You woke me up. You made me remember that there was more to life than work and survival. You made me believe in love again. We saved each other. We did. He smiled. I suppose that is what marriage is. Saving each other over and over every day until there is nothing left to save. And then you just love each other. Simple as that. Ruth laughed. You are a romantic Jesse Hawthorne. Only with you. 25 years. That was how long they had been married when the sickness came. Ruth knew something was wrong before the doctor confirmed it. She knew by the way Jesse moved slower in the mornings. By the way he paused to catch his breath after walking from the house to the barn. By the way he looked at her sometimes like he was memorizing her face. How long? She asked the doctor. 6 months, maybe less. Ruth did not cry. Not then. She held Jesse's hand, and she listened to the doctor's instructions, and she nodded in all the right places. And then when the doctor left, she went out behind the barn where no one could see her, and she screamed until her voice was raw. The children came home. All of them from wherever they had scattered across Texas and beyond. Samuel brought his wife and their 2 sons. Elizabeth brought her husband, a quiet man who loved her fiercely. Thomas came alone, but he came. And Margaret, still unmarried at 20, sat beside her mother on the porch and held her hand. He is going to die, Ruth said. I know, Mama. I do not know how to do this without him. You do not have to figure it out yet. Margaret squeezed her hand. Just be with him. That is all he needs. That is all any of us need. Jesse lived for 4 more months, not 6. The sickness took him faster than anyone expected, but those 4 months were full of grandchildren climbing into his bed to hear stories, full of old friends stopping by to pay their respects, full of Nathan, gray-haired and tearful, sitting beside his brother every day and talking about nothing and everything, and full of Ruth, always Ruth. She did not leave his side except when her body absolutely demanded rest. She held his hand. She read to him. She told him stories about their life together, about the children they had raised and the ranch they had built, and the love that had sustained them through every hardship. I am scared, Jesse admitted one night near the end. His voice was barely a whisper. I know. Ruth climbed into the bed beside him, careful not to jostle him. I am scared too. Not of dying, of leaving you. Jesse, promise me something. Anything. Promise me you will keep living, not just surviving living. Promise me you will laugh and dance and sit on this porch every evening and watch the sunset. Promise me you will not let grief turn you into a ghost. Ruth's tears fell onto his chest. I promise. And promise me you will tell our grandchildren about us, about how we met, about the girl who walked 500 miles and the cowboy who found her. Promise me that story will not die with us. I promise, Jesse. I promise. He smiled, that rare transforming smile that had captured her heart 30 years ago. I love you, Ruth Hawthorne. More than words, more than life, more than anything. I love you too. She kissed him gently. I always have. I always will. Jesse Hawthorne died at dawn with Ruth's hand in his and the first light of morning touching his face. Ruth kept her promises, all of them. She lived. She laughed. She danced at her grandchildren's weddings. She sat on the porch every evening and watched the sunset, and sometimes she talked to Jesse as if he were still sitting beside her. She told the story. over and over to anyone who would listen. The story of the girl from Missouri who ran 500 miles to escape a monster. The story of the cowboy who found her in the dirt and offered her shelter without asking for anything in return. The story of the town that stood together against impossible odds. The story of the love that built a family, a legacy, a life. Ruth McCaffrey Hawthorne died at the age of 82, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who had all heard the story so many times they could recite it from memory. Her last words were simple. "I am coming home, Jesse. Save me a seat on the porch." They buried her beside him under the old oak tree where they had been married. The headstone was simple, just the way they both would have wanted it. Jesse and Ruth Hawthorne. They found each other, and they never let go. The ranch still stands. The Hawthorne name still marks the gate. And on quiet summer evenings, when the sun sets over the Texas hills and the wind carries the scent of sage and memory, the old-timers in Brennan's Creek swear they can see them. Two figures on the porch, hands intertwined, watching the sunset together just like they always did. Still in love after all those years. Still home. Because Ruth McCaffrey walked 500 miles to find a place where she belonged, and Jesse Hawthorne had been waiting his whole life for someone worth believing in. They found each other in the dust and the heat and the desperate hope of a Texas summer. And what they built together, the ranch, the family, the love outlasted everything. The fear, the doubt, the men who tried to tear them apart. Love won. Simple as that. Love always wins.